Hello everyone, I'm Paul LaGrone here in Studio C with our political expert, Dr. Susan MacManus. We are starting a brand new feature that you're soon going to see here on Facebook and on our streaming news channel called Democracy 2020, Your Questions Answered. And this is one way that we're going to be taking action for you this year, helping you be informed voters this election season. And it's already shaping up to be a very interesting political season, Dr. MacManus. This wave of attention is about to come our way with the Florida primary, March 17th. What do you make of what has happened so far?
Excitement and anger and every kind of emotion depending on what side of the aisle you're on, but a lot of people are either really can't get enough of it, others just don't want to see another thing about it. But regardless, when it gets to Florida, it will be unavoidable.
For the Democrats and the field that we've seen so far, and as it continues to narrow down as these primary contests go by almost weekly or monthly, is anyone going to remember what's being said right now, or when the party is sort of forced to come together come convention time, will you see a unified front?
Democrats really do expect to unify on one ground, defeat Trump. But on the other side, all of these attacks that they've been making against each other are ready-made fodder for Republicans to craft political ads from.
You've seen a lot of ammunition so far in these debates. And by the way, if you're watching on Facebook, feel free to ask questions below, and we will do our very best to answer. If we don't know, we will go over them, and your questions could be featured in our next edition, because we're going to be doing this on a regular basis as 2020 unfolds. So let's get right to it. Matt, we have a question from. He wants to know, what is the difference between a presidential preference and a regular primary?
Presidential preference primaries only come every 4 years, and their sole purpose is for voters in a state to express their opinion about who the party should nominate to run as a Democrat candidate for president at the National Convention in Milwaukee in July. A lot of people are a little bit confused. They think they're voting for that person right now. No, this is a stage in the election process where you just, as the term says, preference. You say, well, I prefer candidate this, or I prefer that. So please, 248 delegates going to the National Convention from Florida, listen to my view. And so that's what's happening. This is just an expression of a voter's opinion on who they think would be the best person for the National Democrats at their convention to select as the candidate.
And presidential preference is the setup that we have here in Florida. Why do you think they did that?
A lot of it is to engage people in the process early on and get them enthused about it, and also to give every voter a chance. We, of course, have a closed primary, which means only Democrats that are registered by February 18th can vote in the Democratic primary, and only Republicans in the Republican primary. But it's just the idea of the more people that can participate and feel engaged in the presidential selection process, the better.
Yeah, in a state of 21 million people, a lot of voters out there. Well, that leads us to our next question, though. And Paro here wants to know, is there ever going to be a possibility for independent registered voters to vote during the primaries? As you said, right now, no party-affiliated voters cannot vote.
Right, and interestingly, there is a constitutional amendment that's been proposed through signatures collected all over Florida that wants to change the way that we have primaries done in our state to what they call a top two primary. So far, enough signatures have been collected. All that we're waiting on to see if it will go on the November ballot is for the Florida Supreme Court to sign off on it and say yes, because the Supreme Court has to look at these proposed amendments and make a determination as to, one, is it simple that everybody people can understand, and two, is it a single subject? So that's what we're waiting on. We expect it any day. But should that proposal make Florida's November ballot and the voters approve it, which would take 60%, Florida would then move away from the closed primary system to something that we call the top two primary. It's very different. Only 4 states have it: California, Louisiana, Nebraska, and Washington State. But all the candidates go in the race, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, so you could have on the ballot, this top two primary takes everybody that wants to run, for example, for governor, and the two that get the most votes then go to a runoff in the general election.
Well, there does seem to be this movement. I actually just came back from an interview about an hour ago to switch the power back to the voter. I know this is primary season, but beyond the primary season, there's a national movement to make the presidential contest based on the popular vote and not the Electoral College, or at least alter the Electoral College in such a way that it reflects the popular vote and not state by state apportionment of votes. Do you think that's realistic? Could it actually happen?
I really doubt it, even though some states have already signed on to it. The idea is that whoever wins the popular vote nationally, that state's electoral college delegates will be pledged to that, even if that candidate didn't carry their state. Probably likely to get a lot of animosity towards that in Florida, which is a state which is very divided, and both parties pride themselves on being the tipping point in who wins the election.
We're a big prize with 29 electoral votes in the Sunshine State. I know we've been talking a lot about the process here. We invite you, though, to send your questions in because we're getting important dates coming up here. March 17th, the presidential preference primary coming our way to Florida. What do you think is going to happen over the next couple of weeks as all the cameras and the spotlight turns to our neck of the woods?
Interesting. I've been asking people, have you gotten any kind of mailers or things that people usually get prior to an election? No, nothing.
Wow,
because
really?
some of the candidates have been waiting to see how well they do before they dump a lot of money in our state, which costs a lot to campaign in. But trust me, as soon as you get through Super Tuesday, even though we're the primary March 17th and there's some on March 10th, these candidates will be combing Florida, and they'll be begging for votes any way possible.
The Ides of March can change a race. Dr. Susan MacManus, thank you so much for joining us with always your unique and experienced insight. We invite you again to send your questions in. We're going to be doing this on a regular basis throughout the primary season and leading up to 2020.